All right. Well, thank you very much. Welcome. My name is Peggy Nielsen. I'm the program manager for Henry Ford SandCastles Grief Support Program, and we are happy to be here today to kind of kick off our acknowledgement and celebration of Children's Grief Awareness Month. So, a little bit about Henry Ford SandCastles. We are a grief support program serving Southeast Michigan. We have bi-weekly groups for children between the ages of 3 and 18, as well in person as well as virtual. And we offer our SandCastles camp on an annual basis. And we are here for anyone who has a need. So if you have questions or anything we can help you with, we do grief consults, anything. We want to be supportive and help to educate and just make the world a better place for grieving children. So that is why we're here today. I am super excited to be joined by Jenny Lisk, who is the founder of the Widowed Parent Institute. She is an award-winning author and widowed mom who is dedicated to helping widowed parents increase their family's well-being. Jenny's books, both Future Widow and Widowed Parents Unite, as well as her show, the Widowed Parent Podcast, guide the journey of solo parenting across loss after loss. So thank you, Jenny, for joining us. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Peggy. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome. All right. So we are going to learn from you today. And our goal here is how can we be better grief allies to those who are in our world who need that support at one of the hardest times. So let's start a little. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your story?
Sure, sure. And I love that you picked this topic, by the way, because as you know, I mean, we're both members of the National Alliance for Children's Grief, and the whole Flip the Script campaign going on this month is all about like, what do we say and what should we say instead? So anyway, terrific topic tonight here. Your question was a little bit about myself. Okay. So my husband Dennis died of brain cancer. He was sick 8 years ago right now, which is completely crazy to think about. Like 8 years ago, it's November, we were heading into the holidays. He was sick with glioblastoma, which is a very aggressive brain cancer. From May of 2015 until shortly after New Year's in 2016, he died. And so this time 8 years ago, we were in hospice, we were in all these, surgeries and complications and cerebral spinal fluid leaking out of his brain. And we had two kids, and they were 8 and 10 when he was diagnosed. And then by the time he died, everybody had birthdays. So they were 9 and 11. And I spent that 8 months, knowing that this wasn't going to end well. Glioblastoma almost never does. And so I was caregiving, of course, and also trying to figure out like, okay, sometime in the future, I'm going to be a widowed parent. What does that mean? How do I do this? And then he died, and I had a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old, and it wasn't what I had signed up for at all.
Did you have anyone else in your life at the time who had that experience or anything similar to it?
Well, the funny thing, well, not funny, at all, but
Yeah.
the interesting thing is that my neighbor, who I didn't know at the time, we've since become good friends. Her own husband had died 5 years previously of the same glioblastoma.
Oh.
And she had 4 kids, and the youngest was quite young when he died. And so a mutual friend put us together and was like, you guys have to talk. And so she was, helpful. We did a lot of walking and talking.
She was able to kind of mentor you through it. Like you are now mentoring a whole lot of other people through this.
Which is the crazy thing, right? I mean, what I've said 8 years ago, and here I am like looking up, I guess, to her as like, here's the widowed parent with 5 years of experience and 4 kids and glioblastoma and been through the whole thing. And all these years later, I'm doing similarly, I suppose, for other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Your new book is a what's the word I want?
Anthology?
Compilation. Anthology is better than compilation. Anthology of, you said it was like 48 people that are in the book and kind of giving tips along the way, right?
Yeah, so it's called Widowed Parents Unite. This is my copy with all the marks, or all the little tags here. But basically, yeah, I wanted to. So my first book was a memoir, and so it's a memoir. Of course, you have to sit down and start on page one and read through the story, right?
Mm.
But I hear from a lot of people who are grieving. Either they're like, "Give me every book. I want to read every book," or it's the complete opposite. Like, I can't sit down and focus on a long book. I used to love reading, but whether it's time, focus, grief brain, whatever, right? They can't do it. And so I wanted to do something that was more like you could pick it up, read one or two, put it down in kind of bite-sized pieces. And so it's structured, well, the subtitle is 52 weeks to get through the first year, 52 tips, excuse me, to get through the first year from one widowed parent to another. So I invited 48 different moms and dads. Importantly, I wanted to
Mm.
be sure that this wasn't just a mom's thing or a women thing, because as you've probably noticed, there are a lot more groups, resources, supports, etc. seems to be for women. And women often, I hear from the men that they feel like the men aren't as good at supporting each other as they think the women are at supporting each other.
Mm.
So I hear from a lot of dads that they're really eager for resources and support, because there are dads who end up with their other parent dying, and now they have small kids or teenagers. So my point is, I wanted to make sure to include them and have a good mix of experiences, and each one is just a short, like a page, like here's, each one would be about that long. Tips directly from experienced widowed parents, to a newer widowed parent.
Yeah, we know there's a lot of what is it, like 1 in 12 nationwide children will experience the death of a parent or sibling before they turn 18, based on the CBEM from Judy's
Mm,
House, Colorado.
mm,
And the majority of those are parents.
yeah.
And I would say for our program, the majority of the people who come into our program are definitely widows, and they are mostly mothers. Like, we don't reach as many fathers as we do mothers. So
Right.
you included that. Well,
Well,
thank you for joining us. Hopefully we
yeah,
can.
I'm glad you mentioned the CBEM, the childhood bereavement estimation model, because it is interesting, and actually it's shocking to dig into those numbers a little bit. I mean, you mentioned 1 in 12 kids would experience the loss of a parent, and if you look, they actually have the numbers state by state too. And in some, I think West Virginia is the highest, and it was like 1 in 8 or 1 in 9. It's like really high rate.
Yeah, we're one
So
in 11 in Michigan, and in our
okay,
southeastern Michigan area, it's probably more like 1 in 9.
okay, yeah, and
And we know that that's just parent or sibling death. So
yeah.
if we add on all the other,
Hmm.
grandparent or whomever else that was significant, we have a lot of grieving kids surrounding us.
Well, and if you had just pulled me off the street, 10 years ago and said, give me a number, how many kids do you think are going to lose a parent by the time they turn 18? I would have said 1 in 100. I don't know what I would have said, but like something like that, right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
kind of shocking at how many.
it really is. I agree completely. So for you, what do you think was the hardest part of your journey or your family's journey through this?
Yeah. I mean, so much of it is hard. For me, I think trying to figure out this new role of being a widowed parent, this new role of raising grieving kids, right? So like up to that point, I didn't have any particular expertise in anything out of the ordinary for parenting, right? Like it kind of was like a regular parent, right?
Yeah.
So like, okay, we're doing potty training, we're doing homework wrangling, we're doing sibling rivalry, like the kind of the regular stuff that pops up, right? had developed enough skills at those things by that point, right? And all of a sudden it felt like this huge curveball. Like, wait a minute, now my kids have a dead dad. Like, what am I supposed to do, and how does this not completely destroy them? And how do I be a parent to grieving 9-year-old and 11-year-old from this point on out and by myself? Right. And it was like, yeah, I spent 20 years in corporate IT.
Mm.
So I didn't have a background in like, childhood development or like therapy or anything that you might think could be potentially useful, right? Just 9 and 11 years of raising some kids was the experience I had to go on at that point. And
And
well, I'm sorry, and I was gonna say, so for there's the issue also of my own grief, and that the thing was, I found I could see a way forward, right? I found resources. I found a therapist that I loved. I found books for myself. I found Camp Widow, which is amazing. It's run by Soaring Spirits. And actually, I think they just held their Toronto camp this last weekend.
Oh,
And they
wow.
do one in San Diego every year, usually in the summer, and then they do one in Florida also every year. But so I found things like that for myself, right? And I actually, turns out I had some other neighbors and other friends, people in my personal circles, kids, school, community kind of stuff, who were also widowed parents, which I had no idea there were all these people around, before I got into this situation. So I'm not saying it was easy at all. I'm just saying I'm like, I can see there will be a way forward here, right? But for when it came to like, what do I do as a parent? I went to Amazon, I typed in, right, like, where's the book that's going to tell me how to do this? And I couldn't find anything. And of course, at that point, I didn't know that there are centers like yours and centers like yours in other communities that are, perhaps many of them are members of the National Alliance for Children's Grief. I didn't know that there were programs like this, because why would I know, right? Hadn't had a need for them, and
Yeah.
nobody close to me had a need for them. And so I couldn't find, I didn't know, it felt overwhelming, and I didn't know how I was gonna like figure this out.
I had a group at a program once, and I had asked a couple of people, how did they hear about SandCastles? And one was a therapist herself and said that she had been referring to SandCastles for years, but
Ah,
it took five people to tell her, maybe you should take your kids to SandCastles. Five. And she literally knew how good it was and was
wow,
referring, but it didn't sink in. And then
interesting, yeah.
the second person that was asked, her answer was, someone, I don't know who did it, but someone put a brochure in my mailbox. I have no idea who it
Oh,
was.
oh,
I was like, those are not easy things to duplicate in marketing
right,
efforts.
right. You're like, how do I give that to my team and make any
Yeah.
suggestions?
Yeah. Which I think is one of the things that brings up this conversation, because having it is about us helping each other. It's about spreading the word, like spreading the word.
Yeah,
And uh, and how do we, until you need it, you don't need it and you don't
right,
even know about it. So
right,
that importance of having, just a friend or a coworker or someone kind of say, hey, wait, there are resources out there for you now that you're
right,
in this club that you never wanted to join.
right.
So
Well, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with my podcast for widowed parents, is to like help. Like, there are so many people like you guys in different communities who are doing excellent work. And how can I help the people who need to know about you find you? Right.
yeah. Yeah.
And so, a lot of people are turning to podcasts these days for all sorts of things. I love podcasts myself. And so, I figure, well, if somebody somehow can access your services through my podcast, right, then that's amazing, because I don't have to try to duplicate what you're doing, but I can sure point people to what you're doing. And actually, it's interesting because Kate's Club in Atlanta is one of the big national, larger grief centers, I'm sure you know. Um, I had interviewed Lane Pease from there, and a listener wrote to me who lives in Georgia, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, her husband had died maybe within the past year, and she was like, her kids were struggling, and she had been driving past Kate's Club every single day on the way to her work or commute, her daily commute. Didn't know it was there
Wow.
until she heard me interview Lane, and then was like, wait, they're in Georgia. And she looked them up. She's like, oh my gosh, I go by them every day. It was kind of funny, because she's like, it took you in Seattle to, to talk to them. So so I'm like, it's kind of like connecting the dots, right? And so if
Yeah.
we can connect some of those dots, and frankly, talking to grief allies, the people who are the supporters too, right? Like, if they can get some ideas and some awareness and some stuff, right, like, then they can help kind of keep their ears open, and they hear somebody needs something. Oh, well, there's a website you can go to at the National Alliance for Children's Grief and put in your zip code, and you can find stuff, right?
Absolutely.
So like, the more we talk about this stuff, the more I think it helps in general.
I agree. Now you say that grief support for kids is like taking swimming lessons. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, because this is one of these things. I think it's easy to feel like grief support, like, oh no, how do I know if my kids need, quote unquote, grief support, right? Like, do they have to get to some threshold where it's bad enough that now we say, okay, well, you didn't need grief support, but now you do because you passed some threshold of like struggling or whatever, right?
Right.
And in fact, somebody did mention to me early on, right? Like, oh, you should look at the Healing Center, which was a program here. And it was like, how do I know if they need it, right? And finally, I realized that I was kind of looking at it upside down. That, like with swimming lessons, for example, we don't wait until our kid is struggling in the water. Like, the kid is falling off the boat and now they're drowning. And now we're like, oh, let's get you some swimming lessons now, right? Like, swimming is a life skill. And so when they get to a certain age, we say, hey, why don't we get you some swimming lessons because you might be around the water. And so it's kind of proactive, right? And so similarly, I think that grief support programs, if we look at them like any kid who's lost a parent or sibling, is a good candidate for a grief support program, whether or not they're struggling X amount, whatever X is, right? Like to learn, to be in an environment where you can be with other kids who get it, to be in an environment where you can talk about your parent or your sibling who died, to learn some healthy, coping skills and do some remembrance activities and to do some things that will kind of help kids learn to cope. And because we're going to have more grief not opportunities, that's the wrong word, more occurrences of grief through our lifetime, right? If we live long enough, and hopefully we live long enough, we're going to lose more people. And so I think that, instead of viewing it like, well, my kid doesn't need any grief support, but now they're struggling, so now let's sign them up. In fact, when I interviewed Vicky J, who's the head of the National Alliance for Children's Grief, as you know, of course, she said something like, it's much easier to support a kid now, like sooner after the loss, and support them now than to try to like fix some huge problem later. If they've, I've interviewed other people who have said, I think it was Mary Robinson, something like jails and 12-step groups are full of unresolved grief.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So true.
And so Vicky's like, if we have to wait until then to help somebody, that's so much harder, and they've struggled and suffered so much more.
Yeah.
If we help them sooner, more proactively, it can be so much more effective.
Yeah. And just like you were saying, by finding the people who also had the same experience as you, that normalization.
Yes.
Like, why do we have to get to the point where I feel completely alone and I have no idea what to do, or I'm sitting in school and I don't know how to talk to anyone, I have no one to talk to, or like, why do we have to get to, to those levels of, instead of just normalize this happens, we're all going to go through it at some point in time. So what are the tools we have to be able to get through it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it's okay. And it's normal. And it's not,
and it might not end up being the right choice for every single kid. I could never say that, but I think for every family, it's worth at least considering and finding out and looking into and checking it out, maybe giving it a try and, find out more before you just decide that it's not for you.
Yeah, I agree. I think just that opening circle, when you're sitting around in a circle with other people who all have somebody, there's just some learning in that moment that helps to normalize and make it a little bit more.
Well, and like you said, I mean, I do hear from kids and from parents, like their kid feels like they're the only weird kid with a dead dad, right? Or the only one whose mom isn't showing up for the whatever tea or something. And right?
Yeah.
So if they can be in an environment, once a week or once a month or whatever with a group like at your program, they can see they aren't actually the only kid who is going through something like this.
Yeah. And hopefully we as a culture can come up with some different names for, instead of donuts with dad and muffins with mom. I've heard some out there. So there are some changes going on. We're going to start to advocate that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've now interviewed not only all the 48 people in your book, but all of the people who've been on your podcast, which is a lot of people. What do you think that would be the one thing that you would say is the number one thing that you've learned from all of them?
Yeah, well, I've learned so many things. And actually, I just a quick clarification in here. I didn't interview these people. This is actually they wrote essays. So these are their own words in here. But you're right, through the podcast, I've talked to like 150 people, which is a mix of other widowed parents who are kind of seasoned and sharing,
Mhm.
people who are adults now, but they lost a parent when they were a child or a teen. Which is, I find those some of the most interesting and helpful interviews to try to gain a perspective on what my kids are going through, right? Because we all lost the same person, but I lost a spouse and they lost a parent. So I don't know what it's like to lose a parent when you're 9 or 11, or even now, my parents are both still alive.
Yeah.
Um, and then the third category is experts of different types, right? People who write books and run grief centers and do specialize in different topics related to this whole situation. And I think the most useful thing I've learned, which really wasn't inherently obvious to me, like way back, if I cycle back to before I knew anything, right? This notion of how important it is to be honest with kids about grief and loss, and like not make up a cover story that the suicide was actually a heart attack, and then to answer their questions with the information that you have and in an age appropriate way, but as honestly as possible. How important that is. And it was when I was talking with Lauren Schneider, who's at a grief support center in Los Angeles, she kind of blew my mind when she said that it's so important, the bond of trust between the surviving parent and the kid is so important, both for its own sake and also as a pattern for kind of future trusting relationships that you want that child to grow up to develop, trusting intimate relationships, whether they're with future partners, future friends, future colleagues, right? The ability to trust another human is an important thing.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing is that if, the kid, for example, is told that their parent died of a heart attack instead of something that's deemed unmentionable, any number of things, they're eventually going to find out. Like they're gonna either overhear things or some other kid's gonna tell them on the playground because, you know, everybody else knows, but you don't, the kid doesn't, right? Or they're gonna start thinking these things don't add up. Whenever I walk into the room, the adults all of a sudden get quiet. And I don't really know what's wrong, but something's wrong here, right?
Right.
Maybe they get old enough to Google it and there was some newspaper coverage or something and they find out the truth. And then they're finding out the truth. Like the only thing worse, there isn't really any way to make it better, the fact that their parent died by suicide. It's just awful. You could make it worse though, like by lying to them about it, but also by like if they find out outside of being a supportive context with you, that's worse than finding out from you when you could have a supportive context,
100%.
you know?
1000%.
Yeah. So that kind of blew my mind because it wasn't immediately obvious to me, like what do you tell the kids? What are you supposed to tell them, right? Like about anything. I mean, my husband didn't die by suicide, but it applies to other things. Like, can they fix his cancer or can't they? Right? Do I tell them, I don't know, maybe they can fix it, or if I know that they can't, it's interesting because my at first it was a tumor, right? There's lots of tumors. Some are fixable, some are not fixable. Surgery, chemo, whatever, right? Some tumors aren't even cancerous. All we knew was it was a tumor in his brain. But then they did the biopsy, blah, blah, blah. And then we had the appointment and they said, it is glioblastoma. We don't know how long it's going to be. The average is 13 months. I knew in my gut, it just seemed like it would be less just because he'd had so many complications and problems. And it was 8 months, so it was less. But I remember my daughter said, so I had to, well, my friend called me up and she said, when are you going to tell the kids? And I think she could tell that I was hoping to be like, I don't know, can I please put my head in the sand and not ever tell them?
Yeah.
Right?
Sounds like a
And
great idea in that scenario. Yeah, I get that.
exactly, right? And she's like, here's the thing. She said, we told our kids tonight at dinner that he had glioblastoma. This was like a family friend kind of thing. Um, and by the way, I was sharing on Caring Bridge, which is kind of like an online journal
Yeah.
for people sharing health things, sharing with all the people, the friends, people at school and stuff who were trying to, supporting us.
Mhm.
Um, I was sharing on there. So I had posted, that we had the appointment and it was glioblastoma, and it was like one sentence, and I'm like, people won't know what it is, but they can Google it, right? and
Yeah.
and if you Google it, you find out it's bad. Like, that's what you find out. And so my friend said, we told our kids tonight that it was glioblastoma, and they asked if he was going to die, and we didn't want to lie to them. So we said, we don't know when or how long, but yes, he's not gonna survive. And so she said, this conversation is probably happening at dinner tables all across the school community tonight. And your kids need to hear this from you tonight instead of on the playground tomorrow.
Mm. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, you're right. But how much do I hate this, right? I hate this so much. But she was right. She was absolutely right. And there wasn't any way to make the news any better. But I could have made it worse if they had heard from some kid the next day instead of from me.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. So you did the hard work.
I did. And it was awful. But, I guess that was lesson one in being a parent of grieving kids. Or, not lesson one, but like event one or something, like that was the start of near the start. I guess before that we had like, dad's having surgery tomorrow, and, rather urgently, because he was totally fine. And then he was a little dizzy, and took him into primary care, thinking that it was just that he had started taking this medicine for like a urinary blockage or something, and could have been a rare side effect of that, thinking that, oh, well, we'll just go in and, oh, he's saying these funny things, isn't this crazy? And they'll just switch the medicine, and man, no big deal.
Oh,
And
good.
primary
Mm.
care was like, let's do an MRI of your brain. And then he called us back. Normally, I've had MRIs of my knee, my wrist, right? They call you in 48 hours. They put it in my chart or something, right?
Yeah.
And you get the message in 2 days. Well, he's like, we need to talk to you now. And then he says, there's something really wrong with your brain. You need to see the neurosurgeon tomorrow. And the neurosurgeon says, we're doing surgery the next day. So we went from everything was normal to just like, boom, everything was upside down.
Ooh, that was fast.
Yeah.
Okay. So what can a friend or family do at that point, or any point in your upcoming weeks, as far as helping you?
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. And I'm sure, I'm sure I did a million things. I'll use wrong in air quotes here, like before I had this experience myself, right? Just because I didn't know any better, right? Like, how many times have I'm sure I must have said, let me know if I can do anything to help, right? Very sincerely, right?
Yeah.
And really meaning it. And then as soon as I was on this side of the table with all these people who were, saying things or not saying things, and what they were saying, and pretty quickly you could see like some people just get it, and I don't know why. Maybe they've been through something, or maybe they're just wise. I don't know. Um, so sticking with that one for a minute, this let me know if I can do anything to help. What I didn't realize until I was in this position was how overwhelming that is, because I maybe don't know what I need, and I don't know, if you're saying that to me, I don't know. Let's say you're another school parent or something, and you're not like my best friend or something, but we're friendly, but I don't know what you're up for. I don't know if you're someone who likes to cook, or I don't know if you're someone who likes to carpool, or I don't know if you're someone who likes dogs and wants to help with that, or like I don't know. I don't know what. So like it's impossible for me to evaluate. You're putting me in the position of like figuring out what I need, figuring out what you might be willing to support, and then asking, right? So like, like if I do think of something next week, like, oh, well, who said, let me know if I can have anything? Well, Peggy said that. So let me see. I don't know. Well, now I don't want to call you because you're probably like busy figuring out homework and soccer practice and like all these things. And it just doesn't ever happen. And actually what ended up happening usually was, if anybody said that, let me know if I can do anything to help. Like, oh, okay, I'm just going to smile and say, thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm saying to myself, I'm never going to call them because I don't know what to call them about. right? But
Mhm.
getting specific is the most helpful. So like if you had said, um, I'd love to bring you a dinner. Could I bring something on Thursday? I could say, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. Or I could say, well, someone else is bringing dinner on Thursday, or we're going to be at the hospital on Thursday or whatever. But do you think you could bring something on the weekend? Right? Like that's it, you're narrowing the choices I have to make. Right? Like, can I bring dinner Thursday? I can say yes or no, or can you do this alternate? You've just made it so much easier for me to answer. Right?
Yeah. So instead of asking you the question and putting the burden of figuring it all out and the responsibility back on you
Yes.
to coordinate and figure it out and ask for help, instead just offer a specific item, offer a specific day. And if it doesn't work, what's another day?
Yeah,
Offer what you can do.
exactly.
And then I can offer what I can do. I know that I can bring dinner, or I know that I can pick up your kids after school. So I can offer what I know that I can do. You
Right.
don't have to ask me anything.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And if you really don't know what kind of help, they want, you could maybe offer a couple things. Or you could
Oh,
say,
sure.
like I was thinking about this. So like, if somebody had said, you know, really truly, I'm happy to do anything. So let me know. But also I know that might be an impossible request. So I was thinking that, I could mow your lawn on Saturday, or I could do this or that. Right. Like that would work too, because you're letting me off the hook, right? You're letting me know that you are available broadly, but then also you're being specific. So you can definitely do that. And someone said to me, oh, this is getting more into the food topic, but someone said, because the class parent set up a meal train, and people signed up for meals and things, and another friend from outside the school community said, what's the kids' favorite food that they're not getting right now? Because he knew we were getting a meal train and we were getting, other people's food. And to me, I'm like, other people's food? That's awesome, because I don't have to cook and I don't have to plan. And I'm like, it's great. Right. But
Mhm.
to the kids, I found that actually, like, other people's food, like, maybe it's not that comforting, maybe, or it's like, or they're not used to it, or depending on the kids, depending on all kinds of things. Right. But kids maybe aren't necessarily as flexible. Whereas I was like, oh, this looks awesome. I don't care what it is. Like, yay, somebody else made it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, but the kids were kind of tired of eating other people's food for like a year, right?
Yeah.
And so this other friend said, what's the kids' favorite food that they're not getting right now? And I said, well, actually, they love sushi. And he was like, awesome. Um, how are Wednesdays? Can I, what's your favorite sushi place? What do you like on their menu? And can I bring it the next 3 Wednesdays?
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. And the kids were excited. And then when he would go and pick it up and bring it, and then he'd stop and visit. And then, so it was a great thing. And so it's, so it's the specificity too, right? Like he didn't say, let me know if I can do anything to help. He
Mhm.
said, I can do food.
Mhm.
And and then it was such a thoughtful question. And it's, when I was thinking about food too, like some people sent food that wasn't dinner, right? Like they said they brought a dinner, but they
Mhm.
threw in apples or breakfast muffins or snack things that might be suitable to take along to the hospital, like granola bars or something, right? So like those kind of things. Think about like if somebody has a meal train, they're probably getting all dinners,
Mhm.
which is fantastic, but some other food might also be helpful.
Yeah. Not everybody eats leftover lasagna for breakfast.
Exactly, right? And whereas I would eat it at least for lunch,
Yeah.
the kids
Sure.
who are sick of it for dinner probably aren't going to eat it for lunch either.
Right.
So that's another helpful thing to think about. And then, like another friend signed up for the meal train and she didn't put down, you can put on there like I'm bringing tacos or whatever. She didn't put anything. And a couple days before she texted me and she said, Thursday's my day. Um, I want to bring pizza from the good pizza place in town. What toppings do you guys like, and what time would be good for me to bring it? Which was amazing because again, like it was a nice change. Um, but even I think of that like myself now, like if I get a request to sign up for a meal train to support somebody, of course I want to support them, but I'm like, oh man, what can I cook? And when do I have time to cook? And I got to plan and all this stuff. And it never even occurred to me before. I always thought, well, I better make some kind of casserole, because a casserole, and you can put it in a dish and you can drop it off, and then,
100%. Yeah.
right, all the things. And after being through and seeing how other people supported us, I'm like, wait a minute, I could sign up for a day, and then I could be like, hey, which takeout do you want? Right? And they'll probably be super excited. And it'll be easier for me too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I get overwhelmed by the idea I have to come up with a casserole dish to give to someone. So, but I can pick
Exactly.
up about anything.
Exactly. And the good pizza place in town, or, any kind of that kind of thing is and another thing actually is even just getting like a DoorDash gift card, especially if you don't live nearby, right? You can
Oh,
always
out of
send
town.
a DoorDash gift card, or Grubhub or Uber Eats or whatever. And then they can pick their own restaurant that they like, and pick which day they want to use it, right?
Yeah,
But that's a great way to be supported from a distance.
yeah, that's a good one. I was reading through some of your stuff and noticed the grocery store item calling. Tell us about that. That was a great idea.
Oh, about my friend going to the grocery. Oh, yes. So, okay, so this is another one of these too. Like sometimes people would say, if you ever need anything from Costco, or if you ever need anything from the grocery store, let me know. Like, okay, but if I run out of toilet paper on Tuesday and I desperately need it from Costco, I'm not going to call you, because I'm going to assume that you have 10,000 things going on Tuesday,
Yeah,
and you're not going to drop everything and go to Costco for me, right?
right, right.
Um, but one time someone texted me and said, I am at Costco. What do you need? And similarly, another friend texted me, I'm going to the grocery store tomorrow. Let me know your list. I'll get whatever you need, and I can drop it off on your porch around 10 or whatever time, right?
Yeah,
So because then I was like, oh, she's at Costco. Well, yes, then I need cat food, I need toilet paper, I need this, and that, right?
yeah.
Grocery store, oh, we need milk, right? But she took off the burden of me having to feel like I might be interrupting her, right? Even though
Yeah,
when she said, like, if you ever need anything from the store, let me know, I'm sure she was sincere, right?
absolutely. Yeah,
But it's just so much harder. And the grieving person, or the person with the medical crisis, is already dealing with so much. And to have to think about, like, well, now who could I call who offered to help? And I'm worried I'm bugging them. Like, it's putting too much on me to do that.
yeah. Makes sense. Ah, I'm gonna remember that one. Um, okay, let's go. Let's talk about this is something that comes up in the kids groups. I actually had a really interesting conversation once with a group of kids about what was helpful that people said to them, what they liked and what they didn't like. And
Ah,
there was a lot of strong feelings.
mm,
So be it writing in a card, I know you referenced that before, or just talking, any tips and ideas on how to be a better grief ally as far as the words that are coming out of our mouth or what we're putting in on our paper when we're sending
yeah,
you trying to be supportive.
yeah. Gosh, how long do we have to talk about this topic? There's so much that could be. um, okay, so here's why I think this is hard. Because everybody wants to fix the problem, and they can't actually fix the problem, right? They can't take away the cancer, bring someone back to life, wave a magic wand or anything. They can't actually fix the actual problem. And I know for myself and for what I've observed, um, I feel like, well, if only I can come up with the right words to say or to put in the card, I could fix the problem, but I'm having trouble coming up with the right words. So therefore, I'll just wait until I, come up with the right words, and then maybe I never send the card, or I never make that phone call, right? And so I think that taking a step back and realizing I can't fix the problem, but that doesn't mean it can't be helpful. And I like to think of it like the two P's. You can get practical, and you can be present. Like, those are the two things you actually can do. You can actually fix practical problems. Somebody needs food because they're too tired or stressed out or whatever to cook because they're dealing with the hospital and the death and the funeral. You can fix that problem. You can bring the food, everything we just talked about,
Mhm.
right? you can fix the problem that now they need a carpool to soccer every Monday because the parent is still working, or like whatever. There's lots of problems you can fix. And so getting practical is important. And the being present thing, I think thinking big picture here, like whatever message you put in the card, if you're essentially saying like, I'm here and I'm not running away because this is so awful, like that's kind of what you're trying to say big picture, right? Like you're not, and so, and what that is not is like, let me fix this with a platitude, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, because it's where, when you try to fix it is when you get the platitudes. Well, everything happens for a reason, or, at least blah, 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 something. At least, you're young and you can get another wife. At least, whatever, anything at least. Those people, the platitudes are what people are, I think, often using to try to fix, the problem. And so if whatever you say sends some kind of message that I'm here, and when you get specific now, you could come up with ideas like sharing a memory would be something that's probably going to be well received. Like your childhood friend's mother dies and you could share how, the warm memories you have about, when you were a kid and you had sleepovers at their house or something. Or, in a context of like young parents dying, maybe it's, the person who was your kid's soccer coach, the dad who coached your kid's soccer for years died. And, you could write something in the card about that and how, whether it's a personal characteristic, like he was always so kind, or, she really, my daughter who was in her Girl Scout group always felt that she, was so warm and present, or something specific that's like a characteristic about the person or a memory about the person is both likely to be well received and also is something that could be saved. If you're thinking about maybe a family where the kids are young and a parent dies, well, what if you saved all those cards? And as the kids grow up, I mean, wouldn't they love to know 20 years later or something like, well, my dad died when I was 3 and I don't remember him, but look at all these cards with people sharing these, about how kind he was and about how funny he was and about, how great of nice he was to coach my soccer, or whatever, any of those things, right? Like you can create those that kind of become tools then for helping the kids get to know that parent who died down the road.
Yeah, one of my teammates, when my dad died, put all the stuff together so I didn't have to do anything, right? With the pens and the paper, and brought it to the funeral home, put it out on a table and set it up for people to write memories. And so it was really so it's a great thing to do. I mean, you don't need to necessarily add one more thing on for the family to do, right? But by the fact that somebody else does it for you and brings it. And then we had these after the funeral's over and things start to, you got that basket of stuff from the funeral home that you got to go through, like a week later, and start to write those thank you notes. And you can kind of start to go through those.
Right.
Nice for adults as well as, and certainly I certainly understand, we get a lot of kids that don't have those same memories. So especially the younger they are,
right.
Or just life experiences. Do you ever get the feeling like you go to a funeral and then you were like, wow, I didn't know that person had all those life experiences. I wish I could ask them about it.
Yeah, for sure. And when it comes right down to it, like, I don't know, even if you don't have a memory, or maybe you didn't know the person very well, all these things, like, I mean, even just sending the card, even if it says almost nothing, like, I'm sorry for your loss, like, is better than leaving the person wondering if you even know or if you even care, right? Like, so just saying I'm sorry for your loss isn't really gonna help, but being invisible might unintentionally send the message that you don't care.
True, and that might not be your point. That might not be what you want to send.
Maybe you're all tied up in knots because you don't know what to say, and you do care very, very much, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm going to go back because I think it's worth paraphrasing or reflecting. The concept of the difficulty of knowing what to say. Don't get stuck on the idea that I need to say the perfect thing because I need to fix this for you. That's the only way to make it better. I got to fix it. The reality is the person has died. I
Right.
cannot fix that.
Exactly.
So what can I do
Right.
then in order to be supportive? So without if I take away the burden of being able to fix it for you and make you
Yes.
happy, I can't make
Yes.
you necessarily
Right.
happy and live the rest of your life
Right.
enjoying from this time of day, but
Right.
just to be there with the
Right.
presence
Right.
and being supportive, and then the physical things that you could do.
Exactly. And I think just telling yourself flat out, like, I cannot fix this, so I am not giving myself the burden of trying to fix this, right? And lets
Yeah,
you then focus on what you can
what
do.
you can do.
Being practical, getting practical, and being present is really the two things you can do. And that's not nothing. That's a lot. That, right? Like, it's not fixing, it's not waving a
Right,
magic wand to bring the person back to life. Of course,
right,
that's what everybody wants. But
right.
that's a lot. I mean, and getting practical, by the way, right? Like, a million casseroles wouldn't bring my husband back to life, or a million carpools wouldn't bring him back to life, or take away his terminal diagnosis or whatever. But it helped me, right? It freed me to do other things I had to do, or it freed me to have mental space to grieve, or to parent grieving kids, or to whatever, right? Like, and it also sends me the message, like, okay, this may be completely awful. I have people around me that love me and care enough to bring food and do carpools, right? So, like, it doesn't fix it at all, but it, like, it's providing that kind of caring message, or, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, I know that, as you mentioned earlier, the National Alliance for Children's Grief, of which we are members, and anyone who wants to support a grieving child can certainly join that. They have great educational resources that we, as members, work together to put out there. Um, has a campaign that SandCastles is part of right now called Flip the Script. So if you check out our social media, it has lots of examples of what not to say and what you can say instead. So
Mhm.
we're going to flip that script from these things that might not be the best thing to say and onto the positives. So um, um, I want to just invite anybody, if you have a question for Jenny, or a thought or an idea or a great experience you had, or maybe one that didn't go so well, you're welcome to drop that into chat. Um, and I'm gonna add on a couple. We did have some questions we were gonna go over. Let me take a quick look at those. Um, I think we talked about almost all of these.
I think we did cover a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I was thinking about the food thing. I mean, some other creative ideas. Sometimes people, and this is another thing, if you're remote, right? People often wonder, well, I really want to help, but I'm not nearby. What can I do? Right? Um, some people would mail me a card, like, thinking of you, like, throughout those 8 months, right? That he's sick. And they might enclose a little gift card, right? Because, a Starbucks card, because there's a Starbucks in the
mhm.
hospital lobby. Like, get yourself a treat while you're there. Or a do you guys have Cold Stone where you are, the ice cream
Yeah,
place?
yeah, we
Right?
do.
Like a Cold Stone, like, maybe you can take the kids out for a little treat, like that kind of thing. Um, and it doesn't even have to be, like, I don't know, $10 or something. You can go and get some ice cream or whatever, right? Like, it's not like it's a financial thing as much as, like, I'm thinking about you. And I thought, the kids must be having an awfully hard time right now, and you could, um, do something special. Actually, another thing like that too is, like tickets to, like, Regal, or the movie chain stuff,
Yeah.
um, those kind of things you can do from afar. Even sending a text, like, I'm thinking about you and no need to respond. Like, that's amazing, because, and it takes 2 seconds to write that, right? But the no need to respond is kind of magic, because, the person may be too stressed or overwhelmed, or in a hole or whatever, to think responding seems stressful,
Hmm.
right? And,
Yeah.
sometimes actually person might be more likely to respond. If you say no need to respond, they'll be like, thanks, knowing that there's not going to be pressure of, like, a whole, like, conversation or something,
Yeah.
But
Right. And I
but
got to go back and forth and I need to have that whole time. Yeah.
yeah, that kind of thing. And another thing, um, if you're remote from the person that you want to support, doing some online research, like maybe finding a program like yours in their city, or finding out about, grief camps, Camp Aaron and some of the other grief camps in the summer. There's some online grief resources, that like 1 page, 2 page printable things or whatever, like information relevant to the family or their ages or their circumstances or whatever they're struggling with, right? Like, doing some of that legwork. Like if you find a grief center, obviously you the friend can't sign the other person's kids up for them, but you could call them and you could ask them some questions and find out about the program and how it works, and and then pass it on to your friend. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that people could do, even if they're
Well,
not right nearby.
it goes back to the woman who was referred to us and then participated with her family in our program because someone stuck our brochure in her mailbox.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. That's the kind of the tooth fairy way to do it, I guess. But
Very much so. You also just started the your webpage, the widowedparentinstitute.com.
Mhm,
Yes?
mhm.
Okay. And it is a wealth of resources, and you have your Grief Allies page on that. So I want you to talk about that a little bit because that is some concrete information that people can utilize. So
Yeah.
share.
So the shortcut to the Grief Allies stuff is just griefallies.com, and it takes you to the Widow Parent Institute, the area with the Grief Allies stuff. And I've got a couple of different free downloadable resources, and one of them is some of the information we've been talking about here, and more. And one of them is actually a worksheet, which is like, when someone says because you're still going to get the let me know if I can do anything to help, right? You could print out a few of these worksheets and be like, okay, well, actually, check. These are the things that I need. Can you do any of these? Uh, you know, and even if you don't check them off and hand them to them, it kind of helps you brainstorm some specifics, in different categories of things you might need. So I think that's a good resource for people who want to help. And oftentimes that comes up suddenly, right? Like, and the reason I put some of this together is I would get people contacting me after I went through all this, right? And after some time went by, and then somebody would be like, my friend's wife just died and he has 2 little kids, and my neighbor's husband just died and she has 3 teenagers, right? What do I do?
How can I help?
Right. And so I'm like, okay, we need to have some good information that you can just quick, download, um, and it kind of get, the frame of mind to, because everybody wants to help and be supportive and super supportive. And so I applaud them for doing that. Cause I say we could not have gotten through 8 months without, 8 months when he was sick, plus, after that, without the tremendous support that we had around us. And I was lucky to learn from all these amazing people who showed me how to support a family, in a crisis like this.
Yeah. What would you say to the person? It seems like families have the people who can support them, the people who are okay with that level of pain, the people who are willing to jump in and be there. And then you have some people who, for whatever reason, and no judgment, right? But just for whatever reason, just can't go there. Can't. Maybe they had past experiences when they were younger or whatever, just can't go and go the other way, which I think families then feel like they're a little bit abandoned by a chunk of their friends, right?
So
Yeah,
are
any
you
advice for those people that are like, I want to help, but I really don't want to go near this. So,
okay. So the person who wishes they could help and it's their friend, but they, for whatever personal reason in their history or something, they can't. I guess it depends how well you know the person and what the circumstance is, but I would maybe consider saying like, look, I wish I could help you. I I have my own trauma or whatever the situation is, and I'm sorry, I just can't, but I really want you to know how much I'm thinking about you guys, and I would do anything else, but I can't do this. Like,
yeah,
I think the person would be at least, because then you're like, okay, well, they care. And that's really the most important baseline thing, right? Is knowing, like, I would totally forgive them. I don't want to trigger somebody else's trauma because they have to help me or something, right? Like
Right.
somebody else could help me who's not going to be triggered by, I don't know, coming to the hospital or to the ICU or something, right?
Right.
But being able to at least know that they care is, I think, the most important part of any of this.
As you said earlier, just send the card.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if
Yeah.
it just says, love Peggy, just send the card.
Yeah, exactly. And I got a lot of cards like that, and it was fine. Like, obviously they weren't as meaningful or whatever as the ones that shared a special memory or something, but they sent the message that the person cared enough to do some kind of outreach.
Yep, absolutely. I love the special memory idea. That's like, it's got 10 good things in that idea right there, right?
Yeah.
You are doing it for yourself, writing it. That's a little bit of,
Yeah.
honoring that person. You're sharing a story that the family may or may not know,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and allowing that person to, this forever. I will always remember their sense of humor, or I will always remember how they told bad jokes. Every time I
Right.
hear a bad joke, I think of whatever
Yeah.
it might be.
Yeah.
Kind of does that continuing bonds thing, that person was
Yeah.
influential and left a mark on other people, not just my immediate family, but
Exactly. Exactly. And again, if those kids are young, the potential then for using those cards to help them get to know that parent through the years or later or whenever, um, is, I think, an important part of it as well.
yeah, yeah, I could even put them together in a little book.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. There's all kinds of clever things now to do things like that.
there sure is. All right, well, Jenny, we are almost up here with our
Oh, look at
hour.
that. Wow.
So I'm going to reiterate a couple great resources that you have. Both of your books are wonderful. You also have
Thank
an
you.
amazing podcast and the Widow Parenting Institute.com with the griefallies.com, right?
Hmm.
Thank you for turning your loss and your challenge into helping others, because you are now the mentor to who knows how many people. You have flipped the script yourself
Yes, yes,
on that
yes.
in a whole new way. And thank you so much for joining us and helping um, our people out here in Southeast Michigan and wherever this reaches. We appreciate you. I appreciate you and helping us to spread the word.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm glad to talk to all your friends here tonight. And yeah, I encourage people to check out the Widowed Parent Institute. And I didn't mention we do have resources, of course, for widowed parents as well, on there. So I don't know who's listening, but if that's relevant, check that out. And again, doing research for people, if you're a grief ally,
I was just thinking
you
that.
could download the stuff and just send it on over, whatever. So yeah,
Yeah,
thank you. This
write
has been
that.
great.
Write that in the bottom of the card. Ooh, I heard of a great resource.
There
Put
you
the
go.
website at the
See,
bottom of
put
the
the
card.
website in. I know. Yeah. And this, one of the reasons I did this particular book is for newer, because people are always like, with my memoir, someone just died, whoever, right? Is the book appropriate for them? And I'm like, maybe not right away. It totally depends on the person. Like, I would have probably read it right away, but I had already been grieving for 8 months, right? But other people, wouldn't. And so this book, I really wanted to do something that is appropriate for that first year.
Okay. Oh, good to know. So there's your gift. Drop that off in their mailbox along with a brochure or a resource and the links that you can go to.
Well, the funny thing is, someone just DM'd me last night because she ordered, I do signed copies of this through the publisher's website, and she ordered 2 copies, and then she DM'd me and she's like, da, 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 like, I'm going there Saturday. Can you send it? And it actually is somebody who lives locally, so I'm gonna drop it off at her house. But and she had 2 different people who lost husbands recently, one
Oh,
like last week and one rather recent time. And she bought this as gifts for both of them. So I was glad to see that it's, fulfilling its intended purpose.
absolutely. Well, thank you for getting out there and helping. And thank you for helping us and being here with us tonight.
Of course. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We have another webcast in in November 28th. That's called When Grief Comes to School. So you can, if you're interested in on that side of the world, then join us then. Otherwise, SandCastles is here to help you or anyone you know in any way that we can. So please feel free to reach out to us at SandCastles at hfhs.org, or you can find us online at aboutsandcastles.org. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Bye.
Thanks, Penny. Take care.